I weaseled my way into the project, to be honest. They had decided to implement SAP, which was a big transformation for the organization. There was also a group that worked on the change management. How do you deploy this? How do you get the employees ready and the organization ready? And at the time, I was doing coordination of training programs. That was my job. And I asked if I could be a part of it. And they said, well, it's a small group. We've a very select choice of people that are in it. And one day at the end of work, the project team was coming out of a conference room and it was a mess. There were flip charts and post-it notes and things to be cleaned up. So I went in and helped them. And then they had notes to type up and so forth. So I went to my manager at the time and I said, look, I know I can't be in the project, but can I clean the room for you? When you leave, when you're done, I will clean up the flip charts and the notes. I will take notes and type them up, and I will do that so you don't have to do it. And then maybe I can learn a little bit just through like osmosis. So I started cleaning up the room and tidying it up and getting things ready for the next day. And then I typed up all of the notes and put it in summary form. And I started helping. And eventually I got integrated and got assignments to help with the overall change management program for the project.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Mark Hamberlin. Mark is the Chief People Officer and Executive Vice President at Clark Construction Group. He is responsible for aligning talent, culture, and organization in order to attract, retain, develop, and engage the best talent for the company. Prior to joining Clark, Mark served as Vice President of Global Talent Acquisition for Danaher, a global science and technology company. Mark's career has also included human resources and finance leadership roles at Cisco Systems, Coach Leather, and Hallmark Cards. Mark earned his bachelor's degree in French with minors in business and psychology and a master's degree in organizational behavior from Brigham Young University. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Mark.
Mark, welcome to the Corporate Couch this afternoon.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you. Mike Allison, who's one of my most downloaded episodes. He was on the Corporate Couch. Great person, as you know. You guys have been friends Mike and I have been friends for maybe 2 years. It sounds like you've been 3 decades of friendship, so that's phenomenal. And you're also the first Chief People Officer to be on the Corporate Couch, so congratulations.
Thank you. That's an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can't wait to talk to you about your career. So interesting, and not only doing HR at every level, including the C-suite, but just the global international experience you have. But I know some fun things about you. But let's talk about a fun question that even people that know you fairly well, Mark, what would they say if you told them you did X, Y, and Z that would surprise them?
I do come across as a fairly serious person, but I do like to joke around quite a bit with those that know me well. And one thing that Mike knows well about me that not many people do is I do like to pick up and imitate different accents. I've had a chance to work with people all over the world and developed a little bit of a habit of trying to pick up different accents from different parts of the world. So not something I share a whole lot, but it is something I do.
you wouldn't mind, since I'm 100% of Italian descent, would you like to try your Italian accent on me?
Jeff, I could have talked to you like you're Italiano because I grew up in New Jersey, right? And they talk with their handle like this, and hey, it's all good.
Love it, love it. Hey, you talking to me? That's
Absolutely,
Italian
man.
slash Jersey that I
Hey,
just did. Uh,
that's right.
love it. And you're a Yankees fan, so we share that in common. I love that. Yeah. So, where did you grow up, Mark? And what was fun for you growing up?
So I grew up just west of New York City in New Jersey, a set of towns called the Oranges, just outside of Newark, and spent all of my youth there. Great childhood, and enjoyed a lot of sports. I did play a lot of baseball. That's where my love of the Yankees and baseball came from. I played soccer as well, and was active in scouts, active in my church, and in different things in the community.
So, two questions. What was your favorite position that you played in your baseball career, and or positions? And who was your favorite Yankee player of all time?
I pitched and I played middle infield, so second base and shortstop. I did enjoy shortstop because you had to cover so much ground, and it was just a lot of fun and a lot of action. So that was it from the baseball standpoint. And then as far as favorite Yankee, I really liked. This may sound odd, but I really liked Greg Nettles. He was a player there for a few years back in the '70s. He was a third baseman, and I remember a couple of games where he had walk-off homers or clutch hits and some key plays he made at third base. And I just thought, he's awesome. I want to be just like him. And that he was impressionable as a young kid.
Yeah, he had some great World Series fielding, I'm sure hitting wise, but he made some unbelievable defensive plays, as I recall, since I'm a Yankee fan also. Yeah, that's great. So, did you have aspirations growing up? Was it to be, was it to play shortstop for the New York Yankees, which you probably would have had a hard time because I think Derek Jeter was around when you would have been in the major leagues. But what was your aspirations as a kid?
Yeah, I think like everyone, when I was playing, I thought, well, yeah, I'd love to play professional someday. And when I was in high school, we had a coach that came over from Seton Hall, and he had played at Seton Hall University, and he had played in Major League Baseball for a little bit. And I thought, all right, with this coach, I'm going to go all the way. But yeah, I graduated high school at 135 pounds, 5'9", and I was a year younger than most people, so I pretty much knew I was done for it with high school. But yeah, growing up, you can dream, and it pushed me to work hard and to try to compete with people that were a lot bigger and older than I was. And I was able to do pretty well, but I knew I was going to be limited to high school when I graduated at that size.
So you're 17, 18 at this point, you graduate and you're, near New York City, the Origins, it's close to a giant stadium at the time, now MetLife Stadium. Um, what what's your strategy college wise? Because you go from New Jersey, looks like you go enroll at BYU.
Yeah, so part of my strategy was to get away from home, and I had grown up, spent my whole youth in New Jersey. I did want to do something where I got out a little bit on my own. I've always been fairly independent, and a couple things. BYU was out west, close to skiing, was far away, but there was also the element of it being a faith-based school. And when I grew up, I was probably the only member of my faith in my whole high school, and so this was an opportunity to be around some other people that shared the same beliefs and values in that context. So BYU became one of the prime targets for me as far as the school goes. And I ended up getting in, and it was a great experience.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. So, most of my guests, and I've interviewed over 100 at this point, the first major they pick as a freshman is not the major they graduate with. So, uh, walk us through that process for you.
Well, I did start out thinking I wanted to do something in accounting or business. I had taken some accounting classes in high school and thought, that's it. I'm gonna count numbers and organize them and so forth. Started to get exposed to other parts of business and enjoyed that. and started thinking about graduate school. And as I started to look at potentially going into grad school, getting an MBA, realized it would probably be better to get a broader undergrad education. So I did my first 2 years of college, and then I stepped out and did some service work for my church. And I went to France for that. And as part of going there, I worked hard, studied hard, and learned the language pretty well. And as I came back from my mission, I tested out of quite a bit of credit from my learning the language. And at that point had decided, and I had an opportunity, if I switched to a French major, I could teach. So I could teach French 101, 102 at college, and switch from a major to a minor in business, and just change the breadth of my education. I started to get interested in psychology, so I picked up another minor in psychology and ended up graduating in French with a major, and then both minors in business and in psychology.
Wow, that's phenomenal. So did you take any French courses in high school?
I had taken some first couple of years, so your basic, whatever, French
Get your 2-year
101,
requirement of foreign language. Yeah.
middle school. Yeah, exactly. That was it.
Yes, we were only offered Spanish and French, and I picked Spanish because it was closest to my relatives. I was a first generation U.S. citizen born here, and all my relatives spoke Italian, so I thought I'd do Spanish just because it's the closest to Italian. But in hindsight, most of the women, young ladies, they gravitated towards French. So I probably, if I had to do it all over again, I probably, because really Spanish and Italian are not, I mean, it's a little bit, but it's basically learning another language.
Yeah.
Um, and your Italian accent is really good. So you probably could speak Italian. So then you got your first job. Your first job was teaching at BYU then? At a college, at an undergrad?
Well, it was while I was going to school. So I was a
Oh,
student, and if you were a French major, they had the first French 101 class, a very basic introduction to French, where students could teach that. So undergraduate and graduate. And so that's what I did. I taught for, I think, 3 different semesters, and did one as a research assistant. But so I taught French 101. So if people
wow.
coming in and this is their first time learning a language, I was their teacher in college.
So what was that like? You're basically teaching your peers. Any good stories from that? People that rebelled against your grading process or homework assignments or class antics or something like that?
No, I mean, I remember being I tried to be very energetic and inject some fun and keep it lively and going. The one thing that stands out funny as a memory is we would have the professor that managed the program would come and observe us and give us advice, feedback. And so I had prepared one day and didn't know the professor was coming, and she showed up. And I started going into my lesson plan, and I was nervous because she was there. And she came in to observe for about 15 minutes. And unbeknownst to her, I finished my entire lesson plan in that 15 minutes that she was there. And I was starting to sweat because I was like, I don't have any more material. And then she got up and left the class, and I breathed a sigh of relief and ended up playing some kind of game for the rest of the class. But thank heaven she left at that time, or I would have been in big trouble.
So at around 20 years old, 21, 22, what was your thought process to go right into a master's program?
Yeah, so my first plan was to work for 2, 3 years and then go back and get an MBA. And I was in probably my last year of undergrad, and I took a course called organization behavior, and it was part of the business class. It's like the psychology of business. And I was fascinated with the class, absolutely loved it, because I was finishing up my psychology minor and business, and this seemed to pull all of that together. So you learned all about individual behavior and performance and motivation and all of those different topics that we talk about from a leadership perspective. And I fell in love with it. So I ended up talking with a professor about. They had a Master of Organization Behavior was the actual program. It's a specialized MBA. Today, the program doesn't exist as such. It's part of the MBA program with an emphasis in it, but it's the same basic curriculum. And so I talked about it. I ended up applying to the MBA program and the organization behavior program, and applied to a number of different jobs. I didn't quite come up with the type of job I was very excited about and thought that that would be a great work experience. But I did get accepted into my program. I got a scholarship and a teaching position. And so I ended up going straight into my master's program, which was a little bit different than what I had planned. Now, the interesting thing was in between first and second year, we do internships. And I ended up getting a job back in New York with Coach Leather. It was a division of Sara Lee at the time, but the high-end leather goods. And went there to do a 3-month internship. And that ended up turning into about 15 months or so of internship I stayed on. And then Hallmark Cards, I had a mentor from my graduate program that was working there. And they reached out about when I was going to go back to finish my master's and said, hey, would you mind doing a detour? We're doing this work here. And so I ended up going over and working for that mentor, a fellow named Ralph Christensen, who was the CHRO of Hallmark at the time, and Craig Smith, who was a consultant for them. And so I ended up going and working for Hallmark and had a great experience with them. But I ultimately decided I'll go back and finish up my graduate program. And they allowed me to remain an employee and finish up my graduate program. So I took a little bit of a detour in between my first and second year of graduate school to get some of that work experience. So my whole career has been a little bit non-traditional in that way. But that's how that turned out when I went straight into the graduate program and followed great experience, which was advice that I got and would give to others too.
That's so fascinating. I mean, I just love the twists and turns of people's careers. And what I tell people, and especially young people, I go, everybody has a squiggly line career. You're not going to know where it goes. Uh, I think there's been one guest that wanted to be a management advisor, went to college for it, and is still a wealth management advisor. He's a good friend of mine, Mark Schaefer. But a couple things. One, while you were a coach, either as an intern or when they hired you, I noticed on your LinkedIn you did an SAP implementation, and those things are fiascos. So you're a young adult, and you're doing an SAP implementation. How is that?
Well, it was interesting. I was part of the change management group that was there, and in fact, I weaseled my way into the project, to be honest. They had decided to implement SAP, which was a big transformation for the organization. And they had different tracks. So technical tracks for accounting and different finance and AP. And there was also a group that worked on the change management. How do you deploy this? How do you get the employees ready and the organization ready? And at the time, I was doing coordination of training programs. That was my job. And I asked if I could be a part of it, and they said, "Well, this is it's a small group. We've a very select choice, of people that are in it." And so I said, "Okay, well, if I can help in any way, let me know." And one day at the end of work, the project team was coming out of a conference room, and it was a mess. There were flip charts and post-it notes and things to be cleaned up, and I saw people staying late. So I went in and helped them clean up. And then they had notes to type up and so forth. So I went to my manager at the time and I said, look, I know I can't be in the project, but can I clean the room for you? When you leave, when you're done, I will clean up the flip charts and the notes. I will take notes and type them up, and I will do that so you don't have to do it. And then maybe I can learn a little bit just through like osmosis. And they said, would you really do that? And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd be happy to do it. Anything to get exposure. And they said, okay. So I started cleaning up the room and tidying it up and getting things ready for the next day. And then I typed up all of the notes and put it in summary form. And the team appreciated it so much that they pulled me in and I started helping. And eventually I got integrated and got assignments to help with the overall change management program for the project. And I found it a great way. It was a great lesson to say, if I can add value, if I can help take something off of your plate, then it opens up doors for me. So that's how I got involved in that. But I was focused on the change management piece. How do you transform, train people, get people ready for the new skills and so forth?
God, that's so good. I mean, that's a great lesson. I mean, was that innate in you, like to have that desire to do whatever it takes? I mean, Bill Belichick, the great Patriot coach, I think his first coaching gig, like he was doing the laundry or something, like he did like he just wanted to get in, and he was doing anything he could to get into the, you know, craft of coaching. So where did you learn that?
I don't know exactly where I learned it, but I have always been pretty determined. If I want something, how do I get to that? And the other thing I've always learned is, at the end of the day, it's really experience that matters. What you can do, not what you can talk about. And so the sooner you can get in, do something and get reps, the better off you are. And so whether it was baseball and I wanted to start, like I was on the varsity team early, but I wasn't starting. And so I went to the coach and said, what do I need to do? And so I would practice grounders, I would practice hitting, and I do that after practice. On weekends, I would sprint and do other things to get ready. I did the same thing with soccer. I wasn't fast enough. So trained on running and sprints and stuff like that, so I could be just as fast or faster than other people. And so I think that maybe a little competitiveness and a little bit of, I've always been maybe the smaller person, or a year behind, because I started school early. So I was always catching up, and it was that part of, if I can get experience, if I can jump in and do this. So I think that translated over to, how do I get ahead and learn more things in my classes so I do well? How can I get exposure to something? And in this case, it was, well, maybe if I could just help the team, I can learn something that would be beneficial. And it eventually led to getting on the project, but that wasn't my goal. My goal was, how can I learn something?
Yeah. Did you have a role model at a young age to kind of to say, it's great to have this kind of drive and willingness to do whatever it takes? I mean, or like I said, were you just born with it?
I did have some really good role models growing up in New Jersey. Some of my parents' friends and people I went to church with worked in New York City. They worked in the financial district. And as I was starting to figure out what did I want to study and where did I want to go, I went and talked to them about, how did you decide you wanted to do this? And they, a couple of them asked, would you like to come along? And so I went and did a shadowing day. I went in and I made it on my way into the city and found where their office was, and then went and talked to them for a little bit, and they let me talk to a few other people. That worked out so well. I started using it as a way to say, how can I learn about someone else's career? And always asked, can I come shadow you for a day, or can I talk to someone in your organization? And there's a fellow, if you know Chester Elton, he does a lot of podcasts and he talks about gratitude and positivity. He's a wonderful speaker in person. He let me come along with him for a day on a bunch of sales calls, and I got to watch him. And you pick up things and learn stuff all the way. So watching them and what things they did, and then picking up on, how can I as a, whether it was a student or someone learning, uh, take advantage of some of those relationships to learn a little bit more. And it helped me refine what I wanted to do. And it taught me some great lessons just about being courageous, talking to people. You never know until you ask.
To be so young, I always talk about, brains don't fully develop until you're 25. So to have kind of long game thinking is rare. So I applaud you for that. That's amazing. So look, I know Coach is an international company too, but I look based on your LinkedIn, your Hallmark career, you got into like global international HR experience, Spain, Latin America, France, of course. But like, talk about that. Like, how did you navigate into that experience to get that global HR expertise?
Yeah. So, like I said, I started out with Hallmark as an intern and worked on some projects that they had. They wanted to build out their organization development practice and team as part of HR, and so I joined that team as an intern, and I got to help with a range of projects and work very closely with the team. Good relationship, good track record, and so when I said I'm going back to school, I need to finish up. They offered to have me stay employed, and I could do some project work, come back from time to time, so that we could keep the relationship, and hopefully I would go back to them after I graduated. So that was the plan. It was a good mutual relationship. I had a good experience. As I was getting ready to go back, I had done some work in my master's program on international business, globalization. So I talked to the CHRO of Hallmark and said, I'd really love to get involved in international HR if I can in some way. And so when I went back after grad school, they moved me over into the international division. And so I worked for the head of HR for international. And she was great about giving good assignments. So one of the first assignments she gave me was, we're about to go into strategic planning. I want you to go to these countries, work with these general managers, and help them with their business planning, and to think about not just business goals, but what are the people, what's the people part of that? What do they need from a staffing or talent and skills? So not knowing a whole bunch of any, not having a whole lot of real business experience, that's what my assignment was. And as part of that, I got connected with the French group, and the French group was really trying to grow, didn't have the scale. They were planning an acquisition. And so, as part of that work, I got an opportunity to go help with the project over there. But ultimately, I had an opportunity to move over to France and take on a pretty critical role with the integration of the acquisition they decided to make. And along the way, I ended up becoming the head of HR for their French business unit while I was over there. So it was asking about some things, opportune time, a little bit of luck.
Wow, that's so interesting. Well, the French business team loved you because you could speak you speak their language. So I'm sure there was some great dinners after the meetings while you were over there. Um, was that acquisition? It wasn't Crayola, was it back in the day?
Now,
Uh,
Crayola was already part of
yeah.
Hallmark
Okay.
at the
Yeah.
time. This was a French, this was their Hallmark France division.
Hmm.
And then there was a company called Edition d'Alix. It was a French postal card company that had a few licenses of characters and stuff. So it was complementary product, and
Sure.
acquired that business and integrated in with their French operations.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's phenomenal. So, and then it looked like in January of '01, you made a switch and go to Cisco. So you're going from, Coach Consumer Goods, Hallmark, Consumer Cards. I know they had a small business division, and obviously Hallmark Channel was probably in its beginning phase. But the Cisco, now you're in the tech. What was the impetus for that change?
I had moved back to Kansas City, and I loved Kansas City and loved the experience there. And Hallmark was a wonderful organization. It had its people, they had their 50-year club, people that had been there forever, and a lot of people go and stay. There was a part of me at that early part of my career that loved it and thought I could be here forever. And another part that said, I still have a lot to learn. There's a lot of things I want to experience. And so we made a family decision that I wanted to try something either in financial services or technology. Now, my manager, who was my boss at Hallmark International, had left Hallmark and had gone to Cisco. So while we were thinking, are we planting in Kansas City forever, or am I going to do something different? I did have that call and conversation, and so it was a wonderful opportunity to move to California in the Bay Area with Cisco growing at the time. And so that's where we made that transition to technology. So it was a key relationship, but also a conscious decision of where do I want to learn business and in what type of environment. Hallmark was a private company. I wanted to go into something that was publicly traded. And so it was a part career, part personal decision.
So was your first role at Cisco a global HR? Because I saw, on your bio, same thing. You expanded. You went to, global staffing in Europe and the Middle East and Africa. So what was your first role there?
My first role was I was the HR partner, the head of HR for Cisco's finance organization. So I worked with corporate controllers group and a number of corporate functions across finance. And they were a global organization. So they had teams all over the world. And so I partnered with the senior leaders and their divisions groups all across the world. So my first job at Cisco was a global one. And then subsequent roles led to actually living and working overseas with broader remits.
What I also found fascinating, like you're on this HR kind of career trajectory, and I saw you were kind of two different controller roles while you were at Cisco. So talk about that, because that's talk about getting a wider view of both for you and your experience, as well as seeing different parts of the company. Most people don't pivot from HR to finance, especially at a controller level.
We talk about the evolution of HR and what was being taught about how do you grow into a good HR leader. Part of it was learn the technology or the techniques of the technical skills, I should say, in HR. So learn about those parts of it. But the other was how do you be a good business leader? And so, learn the business, understand the business. So I was thinking at some point, I would like to get some experience to learn more about the business itself. So being in finance, right, the finance organization, I had a number of conversations with some of the people that I partnered with about, well, how might be a way I could learn more about the business. And long story short, I had an opportunity to step out of HR and to go into finance. The organization that I moved into the manufacturing organization, and I worked with the global procurement team, and I became the controller. So I was the controller of finance for that, and I was very good at partnering. I knew how to work with leaders. I knew how to influence. I knew how to manage teams. I just didn't know the technical debits and credits of accounting and finance for the organization. So the vice president of finance for manufacturing, we had a great relationship. She said, "Do you want to come over? I've got an opening. I know you can do this well. We will teach you the finance piece." So I ended up reporting to a peer of mine who knew the finance side and learned that bit of it and ended up doing that. And I actually had three different roles, controller roles, over a roughly 3 to 4 year period, and thought seriously about staying in finance for a while. But I learned the language of business. I learned all about finance. I learned about how to do return on investment. I learned how different parts and pieces came together on the manufacturing side after you sell something. So it was a wonderful business education and very unique from an HR perspective. And that has been incredibly pivotal in my career in terms of being able to talk the language of the business and know how to influence and push things through in a way that the business understands.
Today's podcast is brought to you by ExecHQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, if you want to augment your leadership team, or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
Kudos to that person that gave you that opportunity, as well as Cisco as a company, to allow that. A lot of companies like control. You're not going to be a controller. You're a senior executive in HR with global experience. But it's so interesting. And I don't know whether it was high school or early college, but you said you liked accounting classes. So, you took French, you were majored in French, and then you're accounting, like all your things that you did were like, it was almost like predestined.
Yeah, they don't fit together when you look at them that way, but when they all come together in
Right.
the end, it's a really nice set of ingredients.
Really, I know it's incredible. Yeah, so it's so important to me, and cultures of companies, and we don't have to talk about Clark Construction Group where you're currently at, but I mean, what was some of the differences in the coach culture, and obviously you're really young at that point, and Hallmark, but you had a great run at Cisco, 12 and a half years. I mean, it wasn't the really go-go years, but it was post .com boom and bust. Cisco was rebranding. You were there during the rebranding. They dropped Cisco Systems and all that. So talk about the cultures.
I often said that the culture seemed to match the product a little bit. It at Coach, it was a high-end, high-fashion product. Excellent. They had high quality standards. I mean, any deviation would not get sold in one of their premier stores. And the way people dressed, the way they operated, how formal they were, those sorts of things, it seemed like you were with high-end people, high-end dress, fashion industry in New York. And that showed up in the culture and the way they operated, even with how high quality and prepared any program needed to be. Hallmark was a very family oriented business. It was a private business. They wanted to do things the way they wanted to. But I also saw, and this is Mark's interpretation, I hope I don't offend anyone in saying this, but cards are an indirect way of communicating, right? It is, instead of me telling you, Jeff, you're great, you're wonderful, you're a great friend, and I wish you all the best, etc. A card emphasizes that, and I write a few notes and I hand it to you. And so indirectly, you get my sentiments. Part of Hallmark, with it being a family business and a nice business and a very nice environment, non-union and so forth, sometimes they didn't say things directly. There were ways that bad news was delivered, and maybe in a roundabout way that wasn't so direct, but it worked for them. High tech, very different, very fast. You don't have time to waste. So it was much more fast paced, very direct, get things done. If it's not working, stop, change directions, don't waste any time and effort. So it was, you know, it was very fast paced, and things changed quite a bit. So you had to be on your toes, and what you did had to work. And if it didn't, we were going to stop and change course. So culturally, you learn different things and learn different ways to operate. But often I find that the product has an influence on the organization and the culture of organizations.
So, Mark, at this point, you're again a great run at Cisco after 12 and a half years, and you make another switch. What was your decision around that?
I loved my time at Cisco, and I probably there's part of me that says I would have stayed there my whole career. We had moved a few times. We moved from to California for Cisco. We moved out to France. Then we moved to England. Our CHRO at the time wanted his leadership team dispersed. So I moved to North Carolina and the Research Triangle Park area, and did my role from there. During that time, Cisco was going through a fair amount of transition, and we ended up having a change in CHRO, about 3 or 4 in a couple year period. And for some decisions they had from there, they wanted to centralize some things back in California instead of having them dispersed. And just from a family perspective, we wanted to stay on the East Coast area. And just a number of things that were changing significantly with the company at that time that perhaps they needed to do. So it was at that point in time that I had an opportunity with the Danaher Corporation, and they were at a point where they were growing, and they wanted to work on their recruiting. They wanted to build the capability in-house, internationally, and with their corporate group. And so I had an opportunity to go to Danaher and help them build their global recruiting function. And that became a wonderful opportunity to help them in their growth strategies, but also build out recruiting organizations across Europe and across Asia. And that was a fascinating and wonderful experience. And Danaher was a wonderful company, still is.
Yeah, so again, you're kind of Danaher's like life sciences, medical equipment. Now you're the chief people officer at Clark Construction Group. So I'm assuming it seemed to have a lot of employees, at least on LinkedIn, maybe 4,000, 3,800. But I assume there's a lot of people not on LinkedIn if you have kind of blue collar, or do you have blue collar construction workers, or is it?
Yeah, so we usually vacillate between 4,000 and 5,000 employees. A little over half of those are professional salaried, and the rest are skilled trades and craft employees. And that's within the Clark organization. Now, as general contractors, we organize and manage large projects where we bring in a number of skilled trades to get a job done. And so that's our subcontractor trade network. And they have their sets of employees. So if we were to say Clark plus all of our trade partners on all of these different jobs, it's probably a network of 20, 30,000 or more, but they're not all our employees. So we have our group of employees, and then the wider network of companies that we work with.
What are the differences there in terms of the whole HR process of hiring, just because the kind of the hourly employees that are involved in the construction business?
We have different processes for our professional salaried employees, which we're often hiring out of universities or through professional hires that come from other companies. Our skilled trades and craft people are much more local. They're very local to the jobs. And so local teams, local management teams and groups work on hiring those teams. Often we'll hire a foreman, for instance, and a foreman has a good crew, and through word of mouth and networks. So we have a combination of job openings and employment centers where we bring people in. We work through different unions, and unions have their employees that they assign to the jobs. And we have our teams that through the networks that they know and the talent that they know. But the skilled craft hiring is much more local. And our professional hiring is done a lot through our university hiring and regular recruiting that you might do for any organization with professional talent.
What was your process as you moved from industry to industry when you started at a new company? Kind of the learning of the industry for you, because you have to understand it, at some level to be a good, HR executive.
Usually, the first bit of time with an organization, and anytime I'd work with a new group within the business, I would spend time trying to learn the business, right? What is the product? What are the channels? Who are the competitors? How do we make money? How do we differentiate ourselves? It goes back to some of the early lessons I learned in organization development and finance, right? In organization development, you try to learn at what's your vision, your mission, your strategy, what are your tactics and processes to deliver on that. So it was taking those basic lessons and going in, and whether I was learning about at Danaher dental products, or learning about water treatment and analysis, or learning about life science diagnostic equipment, or with Clark, the construction process for different types of products and projects that we do. The first little bit is always understanding, what do we do? Why are we different than someone else? How are we better or not better? And learning that part of it first, because then you can apply the people principles to it. HR as a support function is always, what are the people strategies that follow a business strategy? And so you have to know the business strategy to know which HR, approaches work for that culture and that, that's that set of strategies. So it always follows. So my first approach is always learn the business, learn the people, build the relationships, and then I can start to understand and diagnose, okay, what do we need to do from an HR and people standpoint?
So, maybe talk about some of the changes you've seen from, the mid 90s to today in terms of, just, now there's really multi-generation work, generational workforce, from the boomers that are still around, to the millennials and Gen X and Gen Z. Kind of what are those changes, and what's the impact on the hiring and the talent acquisition through the benefits and onboarding and performance and talent development?
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of change over time. I think if I go back the 20 plus 30 years or so, with an HR career, early on, it was the debate and discussion was, how do we move HR from an administrative function to one that partners and has a seat at the table? Okay, so what skills, what approach do we need to do so that HR is included with other leaders of the business? So there's a lot of work in terms of what are the capabilities and competencies of HR, and how do you learn that, and what are the approaches and programs and things. And then being a seat at the table wasn't necessarily a question after a number of years. Then it became, all right, well, how do we add more value? What are the areas that we add value? And is that through streamlining processes? Is that through technology? Can we do things faster? Can we do things cheaper? And so there was a whole like kind of productivity era, using technology and productivity and so forth. Then it started to shift and evolve to, how do you add value? Like, what are the unique areas that HR adds value? And it started shifting to things like culture, talent, organization, like things unique to the thought process of an HR professional, that would be complementary to what business leaders would do. And so that kind of, how do you shift to value add? I think this next phase, or the things that I've been seeing, especially since COVID, and the years subsequent, with so many generations in the workforce, with the emerging talent that is, the Gen Z, millennials, and so forth, those groups and how they learned growing up, and the ways that they experienced processing information. A lot of this talent that is new in the marketplace today, or over the last several years, they've grown up with an access to information at their fingertips that we never experienced, right? At any point in time, you could go and look something up and fact check it and go down different paths and so forth. Customization is such a big part of people's lives, right? You can find so many ways to customize. I want that color, and I want this style, and I want to pick it up, or I want it delivered to me. No, I want it delivered to my friend's house because I'm going to be at my friend's house here. And so this access to information, ability to find anything you want, go down different paths, customization, all of that is coming into influence HR and HR practices, and how we think about how long someone's going to be in a career at a company, what types of benefits you provide. And is it the same benefits for everyone, or do you have to have some form of choice based on, are you young and single? Are you an early family? Are you later in your career and getting set to retire? People want to change careers quickly and learn a lot of stuff. They don't want to wait for training programs. They want to have training programs plus access to anything else that's out there. And so the HR function is thinking so much about, how do we find the right talent? How do we attract and keep that talent? And how do we understand their dynamic for access to information, wanting transparency, wanting customization, wanting things to move quickly for them, in their careers and their development. So that shift over time has been fascinating to watch, and keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Clark, where you're chief people officer, any companies you admire in terms of their culture and what they're doing from an HR perspective?
One of the groups I've always been fascinated with and kind of watched is Netflix. Netflix has been very strong in their culture and what they want, the standard and type of talent. I don't know if they still have the practice today. I have a good friend of mine that got a job offer there, and they had a practice of they called it, I guess, sort of what's your worth? What do you think your worth is and what your salary should be? And you could say what that was, and the understanding was, okay, if that's it and that's what we give you, now we assume that you will perform at your best, not worrying about that part, and perform to our standards. We've taken that part of that care of that, so let's put that off the table. Now be all in and perform great for us and our culture. And I thought that was an interesting practice, and the way they thought about customer service and the customer experience. L'Oreal is a company that I admired. I studied a lot of what they did, from engaging customers in their products, that also led to networks of talent that they could use for hiring. And they had some wonderful programs several years ago to connect in with potential customers, but also potential talent. And when they needed to hire, they had a huge database of people that were already connected to the company, interested in the product, passionate about the product, and they never had to, not never, but they wouldn't have to go use search firms and so forth. They had this huge database of talent that they could use, and they did that by leveraging their product and their culture to extend to a talent place. So those are a couple of practices and companies I've always been fascinated with that have seemed to do well over time.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, Netflix. I fell in love with them. I think it was. I'm not sure if it was late 2013 or early 2014 that 122 page ish PowerPoint, internal PowerPoint went out, and now there's been an HBR, Harvard Business Review article about it, and I think the chief people officer at the time, I can't remember her name, wrote a book about it. But it was just a phenomenal. And they would say, we're going to pay you like you're the best at your craft, like even though if you play for the worst team in baseball, but you're a high performer, you're going to get if you're best in class, you're going to get a lot of money. We don't care,
Mm-hmm.
we're the last place team. And that's that's how kind of their philosophy. But what your example I had not heard of before, which is phenomenal. And they were the first. Not, I don't know if they were first, but we don't you don't count how many hours you work. We're not going to. You have unlimited PTO. Just get the job done. Obviously, there's sometimes maybe we can't honor it, but like, you're an adult. And yeah, just interesting. And not getting rid of people, but when people's jobs no longer help the company, very generous with severance to make sure they can get on their feet again. So I mean, they did a lot of great things. There seems to be a lot of talk around age bias in the workplace. So, I've heard a lot of stories of people in, 55 plus, having trouble, if they experience a riff or something happened, their company got bought out, obtaining a job. You have any thoughts on that, Mark?
I think I've seen some examples of that. I think in our space, we're maybe a little bit of the opposite. We have some people that have such deep knowledge and experience over time and lessons learned from lots of different experiences, examples, mistakes, and so forth. So we spend a bit more time thinking, how do we transition knowledge from these deep experts to a generation of talent that wants to move quickly, maybe doesn't want to go as deep on some things, or maybe wants to move companies quickly. So how do we transition knowledge? And then often we find, people may retire and then enjoy a rest for a period of time, but maybe they're not done. And so we think about ways to keep them engaged through consulting agreements or part-time projects on some things, so that they feel a sense of contribution as well as giving back. And they feel like they're still contributing in some meaningful way. Now, back to your question on the age bias, I can see how that comes in. And I think we've seen a bit of that maybe in the tech space and some other industries where maybe there's a bias for younger talent and so forth. I haven't experienced too much of it myself in the spaces that I've been in, the companies that I've been in. So I think my experience is probably more through what I read than and see in the news than what I've experienced or how we approach it in our company today. Um, I guess maybe if I were to say a commentary, uh, the you know, we always need to be adaptable and amenable throughout our career. We always need to be looking to say, how am I adding value? What problem am I solving for the organization? Companies hire people and keep people because they're trying to solve a problem. And so, I give advice to people trying to apply for a job when they're coming out of college. Don't just think in terms of, is this a great resume? Learn about the company, learn things they're dealing with, and figure out how you can be a solution to a problem that they have. If you can do that and show you can add value, you'll get hired and you'll have no problem. Uh, One thing I think about for myself as I move along in my career is, do I stay relevant? Do I keep learning? Do I keep growing? And whatever role I do, how do I find a way to add value and make sure I don't let my personal pride or desire for a talent or desire for a salary or the trappings get in the way of, am I adding value? If I can always solve problems and always add value in some way, I won't have an issue with employment or opportunities.
So speaking of that, I usually ask two questions to get answers from great leaders like yourself, Mark. One, I think you might already answered, but we'll see if you have anything to add. But advice to recent college graduates navigating their job search and beginning their professional career post-college. So you answered that, but if you have anything to add, I'd love to hear that.
I think one of the best pieces of advice I've got that I've gotten and I use continually now is the first 5 to 10 years of your career, focus on getting great experiences. Don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about title. Don't worry about your salary. Don't worry about the perks and benefits or settling down or fear of what other people are doing, FOMO for what everyone else is doing. Focus on great experiences, good people to work with and for, a great manager, and opportunities to do things like be accountable for something, be accountable for results, own something, lead something or lead people, learn to sell or influence in some way, learn to deal with tough situations. If you focus on getting great experiences, the rest will follow, because ultimately your value comes in what you can do different or better than anyone else, right? The more you can do things that others can't or can't do well or very few people can, the greater your value comes. And so if you focus on experiences and you learn to do, no one can ever take that away. People can take salaries, they can take titles, and there's a difference between knowing about something and knowing how. So focus on knowing how and learning to add value and doing it so well that you're better than others, and that will open doors. So focus on the experience first, all the rest will come.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great advice. Second group is that group that decides their career path is going to be in a management role where you're a leader of people that roll up to you on the org chart. What advice would you have for them as they start their managerial/leadership journey from that perspective?
Yeah, sure. Often when we get our first people management experience, we think I'm going to do a great job. I have all these ideas and things that I've never had a chance to do. And you get in and try them and realize, well, maybe some of those ideas are great, maybe some of them don't work. And maybe you're not as, good as you thought you were going to be, and you learn some lessons, the hard way. I think there'd be a couple things I'd say. One would be yourself and know yourself. First off, don't try to change and be something that you're not. And one of the best ways to do that is to figure out, what are your core principles? Who are you and how are you going to operate? Make sure you stick to those key core principles so that you don't try to be something that you're not. And then I think the three simple lessons that I think about for becoming a people manager and doing it in a good way, and I'm stealing a bit of this from Patrick Lencioni, um, but in short, it would be people want to know that employees and team members want to know that you know them and that they're seen, right? So first off, get to know your team, get to know who they are, what makes them tick, um, how they operate at their best, and what things they're going to be good at and where they can grow. So the first part is really get to know your team, because to be engaged and do well, people want to be known and seen. The second thing that people want is they want to know that their work matters, that what I do is important. So as a manager and a leader, you can help people understand, how does their work fit in? How does it fit into a broader vision or the purpose of the team? They can see a clear link between what they do and how that adds value and is important to the organization. So your team members are going to feel great if they know that how it fits in, you communicate how it fits in, and you manage the work and workload so that they can do well in their role. The third thing, simple thing, is people want to know that they're doing a good job. So how do I know that when I come in day to day, I'm doing well? So whether it's you set standards and they're able to achieve those, or you have metrics in some way, or you have certain cues that people know I'm doing well. But if people know not only it fits and it's an important piece, but I'm doing well when I come in, they're going to be very engaged. So as a new manager coming into that role, know yourself, right? Stick to your principles and who you are, but then make sure you get to know your team, help them know that what they do matters, and help them figure out how they know they're doing a good job.
Mark, thank you so much for being on the corporate couch. I love your career and what you're doing now, and I'm glad I don't have to compete in triathlons or ultra marathon events because you would kick my butt.
Thank you, Jeff. This has been a fun experience, and I really appreciate the time you've taken in your style. You've made it very easy.
Well, thank you, and go Yankees.
Yes, go Yankees. They're doing great this year.
It was so great talking to Mark. I just found his career starting from college fascinating. I mean, he was raised by, MetLife Stadium where my New York Jets play. We won't talk about the 2024 season, which we're in right now. They just fired Robert Saleh. But anyhow, we're not talking about pro football today. We're talking about Mark. But he was the only Mormon at his high school. Goes from the Oranges in New Jersey and enrolls in BYU, which is obviously a Mormon faith based school. But I mean, like, goes across country. I guess he was a skier too, so that contributed to going to Utah. But he was just so good. And he reminded me of another guest we've had on, Terry Jordan. And I said this with Terry's episode, and I'm going to repeat it for Mark. So he had the Bill Belichick mentality. So when Bill Belichick graduated college, he wasn't that good. He was never going to play in the NFL. One of his college coaches got him an interview with Ted Marchibroda, who was the Baltimore Colts coach at the time. And they literally hired Bill Belichick because during the interview, he said, I will do anything and I will work 14 to 16 hours a day during the interview process. And so they hired him for $0 a week. And he did the towels. He drove the coaches places. He did the most menial tasks. But he said, I loved it. And I was getting 3 meals a day and a place to sleep. I don't know if he slept at the facility. But it was same thing with Mark. Like, he wanted to learn about things. He was an intern at Coach, and they throw him into an SAP implementation. He didn't get chosen for that. He volunteered. He said he saw these people come out of these meetings, and you know how it is. It's all the flip charts, and there's writing, and people throw their, the sodas are on the, they don't throw away their trash. Some people, and he goes, I'll volunteer. I'll clean up the conference room, and I'll take all this, the whiteboard notes and the notes on the notepads, and I'll type up the notes. he wanted to get good, and he had to, I mean, at a young age, because when he had the coach position, he was an intern. I don't even think he was a full-time employee. But geez, I just love that about him. I thought that was just so good. And then his just takes on the changes over 30 years in HR, how they were just kind of not a doormat, kind of not a doormat function, but they didn't have a place at the executive table, and the evolution of that. And then, once they got there, how did they add value, and the evolution of different ways to add value. And I just thought he was phenomenal in a lot of different aspects. And besides, he's a Yankee fan. We just beat the Royals last night. Yeah. By the way.
Yeah. Well, go Yankees. He would literally do anything to get to where he needed to be or wanted to be. Take down the notes and type them up, clean up the conference room after a meeting. It's amazing. That just shows you that you can make your own fortune. It's not always what you've been, the cards that you've been dealt. If you haven't been dealt a good hand, then just go back to the deck and keep drawing more cards until you can get a good hand. And that's exactly what he did. He told one story that I thought was interesting. And he put a different spin on it that I hadn't heard before, that I admired. And that was, he said that a lot of times when we talk a lot on here on the couch about culture. And he said a lot of times culture will follow whatever the product is that you're selling. For instance, if you have a very high-end luxury product, then you're going to have kind of a high-end professional culture. If you have a blue-collar product, you might have more of a blue-collar culture. If you have an academic product, you might have more academic culture. And looking back on the different cultures that I've been through, I can kind of see how that's true. There's one time in my career, and I won't mention the name of the company, but a company that I worked for, where that wasn't true, and it hurt. It was very disconcerting. It was a company that sold a product that was a very high-end product. Literally, the product that we sold would sell for 3 or 4 times what a comparable product would sell for in the marketplace. And it was that high-end. But the culture at that company was toxic. It just was. It did not reflect the product that we sold at all. And I remember when I first started working there, I was expecting a very high-end culture because I knew the product that they were selling, and within 2 or 3 days, I realized, oh my gosh, this is not going to be the experience that I thought it was going to be. This is a challenge then to everybody to look at, if you're in management, look at your culture and look at the product that you're selling and say, do they match up? Because frankly, they should. And if they don't, you may have some people in your group like me that was expecting one thing based on the product that they were sold when they interviewed, and now they're discovering something completely different. And I think that's a good exercise that people probably ought to go through.
Yeah, it was a great point he had, and very insightful. And that was the other thing about his career. He looked high fashion industry, Hallmark Cards, then goes to Cisco. So then he goes in the tech space. Then he goes to Danaher, so he's in the life science medical equipment space globally, and then now Clark Construction. I mean, so he really wanted to get different experiences. And besides the fact he was a controller for 3 different divisions at Cisco, he went from a 20 plus year HR executive, and he became controller of some like global manufacturing procurement. And that's crazy, but a testament to him. So any leadership wisdom you want to give our great audience today, Joe?
Yeah, today we're going to that great philosopher, Jay Leno, if you're familiar with him. And one time on the Tonight Show, he said this. He said, here's something to think about. How come you never see a headline like, "Psychic wins lottery"?
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.